Well, first of all, how's everybody doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, sensory overload from the bounty of this conference. It's like my head's exploding. So let's do a little, if you don't mind, post-lunch shakedown. If we could stand up if you're comfortable to do so. If you want to stay seated, that's all right. The whole idea is to kind of shake it out and let it settle in, okay? So I'm Get back in our bodies. One breathe in, one exhale. Hope you didn't have too many onions for breakfast and lunch. Okay, and you can settle back in. Hello and welcome back. I am indeed Bonnie Cushing, and I've had the pleasure of being a celebrant for nearly 10 wonderful years. Yeah. What a way to live. I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to you all today about some things that have been not only on my mind, but also in my heart, and that have begun to find their way into my celebrant practice. And I offer up these ideas and these personal experiences with a sincere hope that something that I might say might be of value to some of you. That is my hope, and you can let me know later whether that hope comes true. Now, I'd like to begin my talk with some acknowledgments. First, I'd like to lift up Gail and Pat Sarma. I believe they're not here right now, so we'll do it. Yes, we'll lift them up for their vision in founding and funding the foundation and the Institute. I'd like to lift up Charlotte Hewlett. We lifted her up for her leadership and her unbridled, if I may use that word here, vitality in directing our organization. I'd like to thank Cindy Reed for her enthusiasm and steady hand at the helm of the Institute. I'd like to thank the people who are handling the technology here today, Mark, who's been handling the videotaping. And I'd like to thank all the other teachers and mentors who have given their time and their talent so generously to me over the years. Yes. I love a crowd that loves to clap. I also would like to acknowledge my parents, who instilled in me a sense of wonder and curiosity about all kinds of people, and who encouraged me to care about fairness and to strive to bring about a world that was based on it. And finally, I'd also like to acknowledge and thank those who set up this room today, who prepared and served our meal today, and who will be here after we're gone to clean up. So with gratitude for all those mentioned and apologies to those I may have left out, I want to talk today about how the personal is indeed political and how that connects to our work and is a call for reflection and action to all of us. Actually, starting an address with acknowledgments is a political act. Crediting the contributions of others, especially those who are behind the scenes or usually rendered invisible in our culture, is a political undertaking that transforms the landscape we live in and the minds and hearts of the people around us. As celebrants, we have the podium and the agency to do such things. I invite you to use the power you have to make the invisible visible when you have the opportunity to do so. It is one of the ways that we can bring about a world where everybody counts and no one is unappreciated or left behind. Now, the concept, the personal is political, is officially attributed to the second-wave feminist Carol Hanisch. And she used the phrase in a speech in 1970, addressing the charge by a number of feminists that the consciousness-raising groups that she was running all over the country served merely as therapy for women's individual problems, and therefore was not political in nature or activist in practice. Carol refuted this claim, stating that the issues that women were talking about in these groups, although experienced in the individual everyday lives and calling for personal action, also required political solutions, because these issues' roots were planted in the social soil of the dominant patriarchal culture. Now, the concept, the personal is political, was not new in 1970. It was alive and well in movements for human and civil rights throughout history. It inspired and fueled the Montgomery bus boycotts, the United Farm Workers strikes, and the rallies of the students for a democratic society. It is with us today in the growing movement to end the new Jim Crow of mass incarceration for Black and brown men, in the struggle for marriage equality and freedom from harassment for the LGBTQ folk, in the Occupy Wall Street movement, and in the ongoing, believe it or not, we are still fighting for women's rights, to name only a few. It is also alive and well in the celebrant movement. Being a celebrant, and thereby offering an alternative to the dominant paradigms in our society, is in itself a profoundly political act. We have the access and the opportunity not only to celebrate, but also to illuminate. During life cycle milestones, there is an opening beyond ordinary life that occurs. And that opening provides an auspicious moment to expand the possibilities for the people who are present. We can leave them more fully human than they were before they arrived. As celebrants, we can help make that happen. Now, my own personal story and the political potential of the celebrant movement intersected in a powerful way. Now, I wish that our organization had existed when I got married 27 years ago. My husband Dave and I come from very different backgrounds and traditions. He was raised in a Protestant home in the Midwest. I am a Jew from Jersey. He is secular. I believe that everything is imbued with divine energy. And our relationship is truly interplanetary because he's a man and I am a woman. We had to search for someone who could marry us, who was flexible enough to incorporate elements from both of our faith traditions and add enough quirks to the ceremony that it would be recognizable to our community as having to do with us. When our daughter Molly was born, we had to search once again to find an officiant to conduct a baby naming that would fit all of her mixed backgrounds together. When our son Jerry came into the world, we had to hunt for a mohel who was willing to incorporate elements from both his heritages into the bris ceremony. Alas, in real estate, location is everything, and in human endeavors, timing is all. And we were 15 years too early. But I've no doubt that these personal experiences had much to do with why I became a celebrant, and what continues to inspire me to offer my services, particularly to intercultural, interfaith, and interracial couples and families, looking for ways to honor each of their cultures, perspectives, and life experiences. As a family therapist for nearly 25 years, I'm really racking up the numbers here, aren't I have seen over and over again the legacy of unexpressed and unmarked milestones in my clients' lives because their experiences and needs did not fit the mold of what was available to them through conventional channels. I've seen the cost of cumulative resentment on the part of one partner towards the other for values suppressed or deferred in marking a family milestone. I've seen step-families exclude members from participating in ceremonies because traditional formats had no place for them. And I've seen gay and lesbian couples deterred from making a public declaration of their love and commitment towards one another. I've seen couples with no meaningful ceremonial and public way to find closure at the end of their relationships, no way to welcome their adopted children into the family fold, no way to heal from a trauma, no way to collectively rejoice a new gender identity. As celebrants, we offer an art and a craft that provides these alternative families and situations a much-needed space to express their truths, declare their love, grieve their loss, and celebrate their lives. We answer personal needs with an intrinsically political solution. We also provide an alternative to our society's obsession with the linear and the rational. Our rituals and ceremonies give voice to the unspoken forces which otherwise soundlessly move and motivate us. And they provide vision to the unseen yet powerfully felt truths which sit at the heart of what it means to be alive. French Jesuit and philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin once said, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." I don't think I could count how many of my celebrant clients told me they were spiritual but not religious. Show of hands? Yes. And for those of you who are yet to launch, keep your ears open. Our celebrant movement offers an alternative to the ever-widening and politically vicious split in our country today between the theistic and the non-theistic. One no longer needs to subscribe to a traditional faith tradition in order to acknowledge publicly that they have a relationship to a power greater than themselves, which does not conform to the established deities of institutional religions. We provide the space for all gods and no gods, but always a spiritual space as it is experienced and expressed by our clients. We create and we hold this sacred space between the polarized edges of our society for the people we work with. This is radical and potent politics. For 9 years, I've been the celebrant for a secular humanist community called the Jewish Cultural School and Society. These folks are outliers in the traditional Jewish faithful, for they worship no God. But they are committed to nurturing a sense of historical and cultural Jewish identity in themselves and in their children, and promoting the value of tikkun olam, the repairing of the world. Each year, I have the honor of working with the graduating class of the school and creating a B'nai Mitzvot rite of passage. During the ceremony, the students invoke 3 generations of ancestors in their introductions. They light candles in dedication to the people they hold most dear. They present an original research paper before their community, friends, and family. They share about the social service projects that they've done. And they write their own Hebrew blessing in honor of an ideal that they believe in. I have the privilege of collaborating on this most powerfully moving ceremony, and it is outside the box of traditional Judaism, and it is always a profoundly political moment for this congregation. When my dearest friend, who is also a celebrant, was diagnosed years ago with cancer, I helped her fashion some healing ceremonies in answer to the needs which arose during her treatment. This experience led us, with another celebrant friend, to begin the Restorative Rituals Project, which was designed to not only address the need for physical and psychological healing, but also the need to deal with the increasingly mechanized and inhumane healthcare system, which can systematically reduce a person to merely a patient, or maybe even a body part. We created rituals to help one remember all that you are, to give license to take your time and ask questions, to affirm your treatment decisions, and to humanize your hospital room. These rituals not only serve individuals undergoing medical procedures, they affect the healthcare providers and caregivers who treat them, and the increasingly corporatized institutions that they work in and for. Our Restorative Rituals Project offers personal solutions to inherently systemic political challenges that all people who struggle with illness and treatment face in our nation today. And to you, kid. I'm personally committed to marriage equality, and I put that belief into practice by not only joining same-gender couples in loving union, but also suggesting to those couples that they voice their belief in the right to legal marriage within the ceremony. In one such commitment ceremony I performed a few years ago, I used this wording: "We are also gathered here this evening to stand up for love, to stand as an alternative to the ignorance and fear that would deny it. So until it can fully stand up for itself, we will stand in for the state by sanctifying these proceedings in the name of true love and in the spirit from which all love comes." And I take this a step further, a step I've come to believe may even be more important, by encouraging the many heterosexual couples, those currently privileged in our heterosexist society, to consider including a statement in their wedding ceremony on behalf of those who have yet to benefit from legal marriage. As an example, this is what I included in a recent wedding I performed, of course with the permission of the bride and the groom. Ottman and Stephanie believe that having their union publicly sanctified is a privilege that no one should be denied. Today, of all days, they stand in solidarity with those who are fighting for this basic human right in our country today. They wanted that said out loud today in honor of their love and of all true love in whatever form they may manifest. I've been deeply influenced by the principles developed by a 35-year-old anti-racist, anti-oppression organization called the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. I'll say that one more time, because I want to lift them up. The People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. Their principles not only apply to anti-racist organizing, which I've been privileged enough to be involved in for the past dozen years. I've found that they are spiritual principles to live by in all spheres of my life, including my celebrant work. Now, the People's Institute stresses the importance of honoring history, knowing it, and understanding how it informs how we function. It is a core principle I use as a moral and spiritual compass to direct my practice. Through learning about historically and presently marginalized peoples, indigenous, immigrant, non-white, and queer, to name a few, and becoming culturally competent around those cultures which differ from my own, I am able to both self-correct the toxic legacies of my implicit biases. I'd like to believe I don't have them, but I've come to know that I do, and authentically to respect and honor the people I serve. But for me, it cannot stop at conventional cultural competence. I feel the need to stay awake and ever vigilant about the ways in which I have been socialized since birth into the dominant culture and how that socialization informs the ways that I walk in the world. For instance, the dominant culture has implicitly taught me that I have the right to borrow others' traditions without any accountability or obligation to them. This has roots in our nation's history by discovering land that people had been living on for thousands of years, and by exploiting slave and immigrant labor. And we can be all too ready to appropriate the vitality of other cultures, but I need to ask myself, what is my relationship to the historical and very current struggles of the peoples whose culture I so instinctively benefit from? What is the status of the indigenous of the land I stand upon while I quote a Navajo poem or invoke the four directions? This legacy of borrowing without paying attention or homage to those I borrow from is an unearned privilege I have inherited. How I can accountably use this wisdom and these customs is a question I need to ask myself in the ceremonial work I do. And it is something that I've come to bring up with my clients as a matter of course. I've been told I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to try not to race through. Incorporating these rich cultural expressions and diverse art forms without political consciousness, without, at the very least, a conversation with my clients about them, has become spiritually dissonant to me. I don't refuse to include them in ceremonies I create and perform, but I do invite my clients to consider including in their ceremony an expression of gratitude to the peoples that practice these rituals or that wrote these poems or prayers, and acknowledging the struggle that they are historically and presently engaged in for their very survival. Whether or not my clients decide to do so is up to them, and my bottom line, of course, is to honor their vision. But I just do my part by bringing the issue up and possibly planting a seed, and I've yet to have a client who's resented having the dialogue with me. An opportunity to apply this principle arose while I was co-creating a home blessing ceremony for a client who was open to including an acknowledgement before calling in the four directions. Here is what we came up with. We begin by orienting this house in space through the indigenous invocation of calling in the directions. We use this tradition today with conscious gratitude to those who once called this land home, and even now struggle for their cultural, spiritual, and in many cases, literal existence. Inspired by the principle that history counts and should be given a voice, I strongly encourage my clients to embrace the opportunities afforded by ceremony to honor their ancestors, to thank their loved ones, and to acknowledge the interconnectivity of their lives with the community that surrounds them. We are not alone, nor do we achieve anything alone, despite the American myth of rugged individualism. Praising the shoulders upon which we all stand provides people a chance to ritualistically confront this myth and to turn, and now I have my one multimedia moment, to turn our eye into a we, and thereby a bit of our societal illness into wellness. Aren't words magic? I discovered that a couple of years ago. It blew my mind. Okay, I'm concluding now. Thank you for your patience. We've come to associate political with election campaigns, with legislation, and with protest in the streets. Yes, these are all political activities. But what we do is political too, and deeply so. We are architects of an alternative space where the outliers, the marginalized, and the unconventional can celebrate their love, shed their tears, mark their achievements, and welcome their kin, and where stories of the oppressed and their struggles can accountably be recognized and told. Politics, at its very core, is deeply personal, and it needs to be relevant and of practical use to ordinary people. It needs to be at the grassroots level, and that is where we are located. We are change agents working for a transformed society and world. We celebrants are building a world, one person, one couple, one family, one community at a time, a world where the recognition of our unique yet shared humanity is lifted up and celebrated, where relationships are of primary importance, where people who live outside the box of conventional practice and institutional religion are given the license to express their beliefs, their values, and their traditions, and where both the sick and the healers can be healed, where the blending of cultures, races, and faith traditions are affirmed, and where all forms of love are sanctioned and blessed. I enthusiastically invite all of you to take the time to assess and periodically reassess what your beliefs and values are, and to find creative ways to manifest them in your celebrant practice, with the permission and endorsement of your clients, of course. And I invite you to encourage your clients to deeply examine the ideals they hold most dear and collaborate with you in weaving those principles into their ceremonies. In this very, very personal and very, very political way, we can change the world. Thank you.